Ambassador Kelthar's 4 eyes widened in horror as the data streams flooded his neural interface. The readings couldn't be correct. No species could survive on such a hostile world, let alone develop space travel. Yet the evidence was undeniable. The planet they called Earth rotated around a star that bombarded it with dangerous radiation. Its magnetic field fluctuated wildly, allowing deadly cosmic particles to strike the surface. The atmospheric composition contained 21% oxygen, a highly reactive gas that should have poisoned any complex life forms. Worse still, the planet's gravity was nearly double what most civilized species considered habitable. "This must be an error in our scanning equipment," Kelthar muttered to his research team aboard the Galactic Council vessel Serenity's Edge. His translator collar converted his clicks and whistles into standard galactic common. No intelligent life could emerge from such a death world. Dr. Vixen, a reptilian Sauran scientist, examined her instruments with growing unease. Her scales had turned a pale yellow, a clear sign of distress among her people. "The scans are accurate, Ambassador. But there's more. The planet's surface is covered in massive bodies of liquid dihydrogen monoxide. The atmospheric pressure would crush most beings. And look at these weather patterns." She projected a holographic display showing Earth's climate data. Massive storm systems raged across the continents, with wind speeds that could tear apart most spacecraft. Lightning strikes occurred millions of times per day. The planet's axis tilted at an extreme angle, creating seasonal variations that would kill most galactic citizens. "Impossible," whispered Tenor, the insectoid communications officer. His antennae twitched nervously. "The temperature variations alone range from -40 to +50 degrees Celsius. Nothing could adapt to such extremes." But the electromagnetic signatures didn't lie. Cities sprawled across every continent, glowing with artificial light, visible even from space. Orbital debris suggested an active space program. Radio transmissions filled the electromagnetic spectrum with patterns that could only indicate intelligent communication. Kelthar felt his breathing sacs constrict with anxiety. As a representative of the Galactic Council, he had encountered thousands of species across the galaxy. Each one had emerged from worlds with stable climates, protective atmospheres, and reasonable gravity. The harshest environment any council species had originated from barely registered as mildly uncomfortable by galactic standards. "Run the atmospheric analysis again," he ordered. "Check for artificial terraforming, environmental suits, underground cities. There must be an explanation." Hours passed as the team conducted deeper scans. The results only made things worse. The beings on this world, humans according to their intercepted transmissions, lived directly on the surface. They breathed the poisonous atmosphere without protection. Their cities rose high into the sky, exposed to the deadly radiation and crushing atmospheric pressure. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to thrive in environments that would instantly kill other galactic species. Thermal imaging showed humans living in regions where the temperature dropped below freezing for months at a time. Others inhabited areas where the heat rose to levels that would cook most known life forms. Some actually lived in structures floating on the violent seas, riding out storms that generated more energy than fusion reactors. "Look at these biological scans," Dr. Vixen said, her voice barely a whisper. "Their muscle density is 3 times what it should be for their size. Their bone structure could withstand impacts that would shatter our skeletons. And their cardiovascular system—" She paused, checking her readings multiple times before continuing. "Their hearts pump liquid through their bodies at pressures that would burst our circulatory systems. They process oxygen at rates that would cause cell death in any other species. Their brain tissue shows electrical activity levels that should cause immediate neural breakdown." Tenor's compound eyes focused on the communication intercepts. "Ambassador, you need to hear these transmissions. They're discussing something they call extreme sports. activities they engage in for recreation. The recordings played through the ship's speakers. Humans talking excitedly about jumping from aircraft with only fabric to slow their fall. Others described diving to crushing ocean depths or climbing mountains where the air was too thin to breathe. Some discussed racing vehicles at speeds that would tear apart most alien transportation. "They do these things for fun?" Kelthar asked in disbelief. "It appears so, but there's more. They have entire industries built around survival in hostile environments. Look at these images." The holographic display showed humans in various extreme situations. Teams crossed frozen wastelands where the cold would freeze alien blood in seconds. Groups ventured into underground caverns filled with toxic gases. Others deliberately exposed themselves to environments so dangerous that the Galactic Council classified them as instant death zones. Dr. Vixen's scales had now turned completely white, the Sauran equivalent of terror. "Ambassador, these beings aren't just surviving on a death world. They've turned survival into entertainment. They seek out dangerous situations deliberately." The implications hit Kelthar like a gravitational wave. If humans considered these activities recreational, what were their military capabilities like? What did they consider actual warfare? "Pull up their historical records," he ordered. "Check for conflicts, wars, anything that might indicate their combat potential." The search results made everyone on the ship fall silent. Human history was an endless cycle of warfare, survival, and adaptation to increasingly deadly challenges. They had fought with primitive weapons that required close contact with enemies. They had developed explosives powerful enough to devastate entire cities, then built even larger cities as if daring the universe to destroy them again. Their warfare had evolved from crude clubs to weapons that could split atoms. They had created tools of destruction so powerful that they could render their own planet uninhabitable, yet somehow maintained enough restraint to avoid destroying themselves. Barely. "Look at their space program," Tenor said, his voice trembling. "They strap themselves to controlled explosions and launch into the vacuum of space. They consider this routine, acceptable risk." The data showed humans regularly exposing themselves to conditions that would kill most galactic species in milliseconds. They worked in the vacuum of space, wearing only thin protective suits. They traveled between worlds using primitive chemical rockets that had failure rates no civilized species would tolerate. Most shocking of all, they had already begun expanding beyond their death world. Probe signals indicated human settlements on their planet's moon, a lifeless rock with no atmosphere and crushing gravitational stress. Other settlements existed on a neighboring planet with an atmosphere made of poison gases and surface temperatures that could melt lead. "They're not just surviving these environments," Dr. Vixen observed. "They're expanding into them. They're making homes in places that would serve as execution chambers for other species." Kelthar's breathing became rapid and shallow as the full picture emerged. Humans weren't an anomaly or a scientific curiosity. They were a species that had evolved in hell and learned to call it home. They had spent their entire evolutionary history adapting to conditions that would exterminate any other known life form. "Ambassador," Tenor said urgently, "we're detecting movement in the outer system. Multiple objects approaching at high velocity." The main display showed several metallic objects accelerating toward their position. The designs were unlike anything in galactic databases, crude and angular, built more like weapons than exploration vessels. They moved with purpose and speed that suggested advanced propulsion technology. "Are they spacecraft?" Kelthar asked. "Confirmed. 5 vessels. Human design based on electromagnetic signatures." "But Ambassador, look at their approach vector. They're not taking evasive action or following standard first contact protocols. They're coming straight at us." Dr. Vixen checked her sensors repeatedly. "Their acceleration would crush most galactic species. The G-forces alone would turn our internal organs into liquid. But their crews appear to be functioning normally. The truth dawned on Kelthar with crystal clarity. These humans had been watching the Galactic Council ship from the moment it entered their system. They had observed the scans, the probes, the data collection. And now they were responding. Not with fear or curiosity, as any reasonable species would. They were responding with what could only be interpreted as confident aggression. 5 warships approaching a clearly superior alien vessel with no apparent concern for their own safety. "Ambassador, incoming transmission," Tenor announced. "They're attempting communication." "Put it through." The voice that emerged from the speakers was calm, controlled, and utterly without fear. It spoke in a language that the universal translator struggled to process, harsh consonants and sharp vowel sounds that seemed designed for efficiency rather than beauty. "Unknown vessel, this is Commander Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet. You are conducting unauthorized surveillance in human space. Identify yourselves immediately and explain your intentions." The tone wasn't pleading or desperate. It wasn't even particularly hostile. It was the voice of someone giving orders who expected to be obeyed. The voice of a predator addressing potential prey. Kelthar's worst fears crystallized. These humans didn't fear the unknown. They commanded it. They didn't hide from superior technology. They challenged it. They had emerged from a world that would kill any other species, and they had done so by becoming something that was perhaps no longer entirely natural. "Open a channel," he said quietly. "And prepare the emergency jump drives. I have a feeling we're going to need them." As the human fleet drew closer, their ships became visible on the main screen. They were scarred and battle-worn, suggesting regular use in combat. Weapon systems that the Galactic Council had banned as too dangerous were clearly visible on their hulls. These weren't exploration vessels. They were warships designed by and for beings who had learned to survive by being more dangerous than everything else around them. For the first time in his long diplomatic career, Ambassador Kelthar understood what it meant to be prey. And the predators were coming. The 5 human ships took up formation around the Galactic Council vessel, not threatening but clearly in control of the situation. Their movements were precise and coordinated, suggesting military discipline and extensive combat experience. "Commander Chen," Kelthar said into the communication array, hoping his translation software would convey the appropriate mixture of respect and caution. "I am Ambassador Kelthar of the Galactic Council. We come in peace, seeking first contact with your species." There was a pause before the human responded. When she did, her voice carried what could only be described as amusement. "Ambassador, we've been monitoring galactic communications for decades. We know about your council. The question is, why are you here now? And why were you scanning our world like you were planning an invasion?" Ambassador Kelthar felt his 4 hearts beating out of sync as the human commander's words sank in. They had been monitoring galactic communications for decades. These Deathworld dwellers had been watching the galaxy's most advanced civilizations without anyone knowing. "Commander Chen," he managed, trying to keep his voice steady. "We were conducting standard first contact protocols. Our scans were meant to understand your world's environment, not to plan any hostile action." "Standard protocols," the human repeated, and Kelthar could hear what sounded suspiciously like a laugh in her voice. "Let me tell you what your standard protocols look like from our perspective, Ambassador." The main display suddenly filled with data that made Dr. Vixen's scales turn completely transparent with shock. The humans were somehow accessing the Galactic Council ship's scanning records and displaying them back to their owners. "You've been mapping our military installations," Commander Chen continued conversationally. "Cataloging our weapon systems, recording the locations of our major population centers. Your scans were so detailed that you could target individual buildings from orbit." Tenor's antennae began vibrating uncontrollably. "Impossible," he whispered. Our security systems are unhackable. No primitive species should be able to access our databases. Dr. Vixen was frantically checking her instruments. Ambassador, they've not just accessed our scanning records, they're currently inside our computer networks. Look at this. Her displays showed human code spreading through the ship's systems like a living organism. It wasn't destroying or corrupting anything. It was simply reading everything. Personnel files, ship schematics, weapons specifications, even Kelthar's private diplomatic correspondence with the Council. How? Kelthar asked, his voice barely a whisper. We've had a lot of practice, Commander Chen replied, apparently having heard his question through their compromised communication systems. You're not the first galactic civilization we've encountered, though you are the most arrogant. The implications hit the entire crew simultaneously. Humans had been contacted by other galactic species before, and apparently those encounters hadn't gone well for the aliens. Who else have you met? Kelthar asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. The Mercarian Trading Consortium tried to establish mining operations in our outer system about 30 years ago. They assumed we were too primitive to notice or object. They learned otherwise. Dr. Vixen pulled up the galactic databases. The Mercarian Trading Consortium had indeed gone silent 30 years ago. Their fate had been a mystery that intelligence services across the galaxy had investigated without success. The hegemony of Blessed World sent a conversion fleet 15 years later, Commander Chen continued. They wanted to enlighten us with their superior religious philosophy. They insisted we abandon our primitive beliefs and worship their cosmic deity. The hegemony of Blessed Worlds. Another missing civilization. Kelthar remembered the reports. An entire exploration and conversion fleet had simply vanished while investigating primitive worlds in the outer spiral arm. What did you do to them? Dr. Vixen asked, though her voice shook with the knowledge that she probably didn't want to know. We educated them, the human said simply. We taught them that religious conversion at gunpoint isn't actually religion, it's conquest. They learned the difference. Taynor was pulling up more historical records. The pattern was becoming clear. Over the past 50 years, several galactic powers had sent expeditions to this region of space. None had returned. The galactic community had assumed they had encountered some natural disaster or fallen victim to pirates. They had never considered that a single species from one world could be responsible for the disappearance of multiple spacefaring civilizations. You destroyed entire fleets, Kelthar said, the words coming out like an accusation. We defended ourselves, Commander Chen corrected. Each time we tried peaceful contact first. Each time, they assumed our primitive appearance meant we were helpless. They all made the same mistake you're making right now. What mistake? Kelthar asked, though he suspected he knew. You think Deathworld means primitive. You think difficult environment means limited capability. You think because we come from a harsh planet, we must be simple survivors who barely understand technology. The human ships moved closer, their formations shifting with mechanical precision. Kelthar noticed that each vessel was covering different angles of approach and retreat. These weren't random positions. They were tactical formations designed by people who understood three-dimensional warfare. The truth is exactly the opposite, Commander Chen explained. Deathworld means we learn to survive conditions that would kill you instantly. Difficult environment means we develop technology to thrive in situations you can't even imagine. Coming from a harsh planet means we built ourselves into something harder than the hardest challenges the universe could throw at us. Dr. Vixen was scanning the human ships with increasing desperation, trying to understand their technology. Her readings made no sense. The power outputs were impossible. The structural integrity should have collapsed under the stress of their acceleration. Their weapon systems operated on principles that violated known physics. Look at their ship construction, she whispered to Kelthar. They're using controlled nuclear fusion as if it were a simple chemical reaction. Their hull materials are compressed to densities that should be physically impossible. And their weapons— She paused, checking her readings again. Ambassador, each of their ships carries enough destructive power to sterilize a planet. Not conquer it, sterilize it. Remove all life from the surface and render it permanently uninhabitable. Commander Chen apparently overheard this observation as well. Dr. Vixen, isn't it? Your scans are very thorough. Yes, each of our ships could destroy a world if necessary, but that's not what makes us dangerous. Then what does? Kelthar asked, though his breathing sacs were starting to fail from stress. What makes us dangerous is that we don't want to destroy worlds. We prefer to leave civilizations intact when possible, but we've learned that sometimes the only way to maintain peace is to demonstrate overwhelming superiority, to make potential enemies understand that aggression against humanity is not just unwise, it's suicide. The scanning data from Dr. Vixen's instruments painted a picture that defied understanding. The human ships weren't just advanced. They were built using technologies that seemed to ignore fundamental laws of physics. Their engines operated at efficiency rates that approached theoretical maximums. Their computers processed information at speeds that suggested quantum processing beyond anything the Galactic Council had achieved. Most disturbing of all, the ships showed signs of continuous combat use. Repair scars, reinforced sections, upgraded weapon mounts. These weren't ceremonial vessels or exploration ships. They were working warships that had seen regular action. "You're not explorers," Tenor observed. "You're warriors." "Everyone from a death world is a warrior," Commander Chen replied. "The difference is that some species fight their environment. We made friends with ours. We learned that the universe doesn't care about our survival, so we became tough enough that our survival became the universe's problem." Kelthar was trying to process the strategic implications when alarms started sounding throughout his ship. Emergency lights bathed the bridge in red warning illumination. "What's happening?" he demanded. Dr. Vixen's voice was high with panic. "Ambassador, we're detecting massive energy signatures approaching from deeper in the human system. Multiple contacts, dozens of them." The main display showed a sight that would haunt Kelthar's dreams for the rest of his life. Ships were emerging from what appeared to be empty space. Dozens of human vessels that had been hidden so effectively that Galactic Council sensors couldn't detect them even when they were revealing themselves. But these weren't more escort ships like the 5 surrounding them. These were massive vessels, each one larger than the Galactic Council's biggest dreadnoughts. Their hulls bristled with weapon systems that belonged in theoretical physics textbooks rather than practical engineering. "Fleet Admiral Harrison sends his compliments," Commander Chen said casually. "The Terran Defense Fleet takes first contact very seriously. We've assembled a welcoming committee appropriate to the occasion." "How many ships do you have?" Dr. Vixen asked weakly. "In this system? About 200? Across human space? That's classified. But I can tell you that this isn't our main fleet. This is just the home guard. 200 ships, each one capable of destroying planets, each one crewed by beings who had evolved to survive conditions that would instantly kill any other known species." Kelthar realized that humanity wasn't just another member species for the Galactic Council to contact and integrate. They were looking at something entirely new, a species that could challenge the combined might of the galactic community. A civilization that had taken the worst possible evolutionary circumstances and forged themselves into something that made the universe's apex predators look like prey animals. "What do you want from us?" Kelthar asked, abandoning all pretense of diplomatic superiority. "That's the wrong question, Ambassador," Commander Chen replied. "The right question is, what does the Galactic Council want from us? Because we already know the answer. You want to study us, catalog us, and then decide whether we're useful enough to be allowed to exist. You want to determine whether we pose a threat to galactic stability." Dr. Vixen was frantically reviewing their mission parameters. Everything Commander Chen had said was accurate. The Galactic Council's standard first contact protocols involved exactly those steps. "We're not your enemies," Kelthar protested. "Maybe not yet," the human agreed. "But your history suggests you eventually become enemies with anyone who doesn't submit to Council authority. Species that refuse to accept galactic civilization eventually find themselves facing economic sanctions, technological blockades, and, if necessary, military intervention." Tenor was accessing historical databases. The pattern was there, hidden in diplomatic language and bureaucratic efficiency. Over the centuries, the Galactic Council had encountered hundreds of species. Those who integrated became member worlds. Those who refused faced escalating pressure until they either submitted or were reduced to primitive subsistence. "How do you know our history?" Kelthar asked. "Because we've been studying you for longer than you've known we exist. Every species you've contacted, every world you've integrated, every civilization you've eliminated, we know about all of it. We've been preparing for this meeting for decades." The implications were staggering. While the Galactic Council believed they were making first contact with a primitive species, the humans had been watching, learning, and preparing for war with the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. "We don't want conflict," Kelthar said desperately. "The Council seeks peaceful coexistence with all intelligent species." "Under Council authority," Commander Chen added, "with Council oversight, following Council regulations, accepting Council justice. That's not coexistence, Ambassador. That's conquest with better marketing." The human fleet had completely surrounded the Galactic Council ship, not threatening, but clearly in complete control of the situation. Escape was impossible. Resistance was futile. Communication with the outside galaxy was being jammed so effectively that even emergency signals couldn't get through. For the first time in galactic history, a Council first contact mission was at the complete mercy of the species they had come to evaluate. And that species had demonstrated capabilities that suggested they could challenge the Council's authority across the entire galaxy. "So, what happens now?" Kelthar asked, his voice barely audible. Commander Chen's response was almost gentle. "Now, you get to make a choice, Ambassador. You can go back to your Council and tell them that humanity is a primitive species living on a backwater death world. That we pose no threat to galactic civilization and should be left alone. And if we refuse, then you get to explain to your Council why their newest first contact mission discovered that there's a species out here capable of ending their authority permanently. A species that has been watching them for decades, learning their weaknesses, and preparing for war." The silence on the bridge stretched for long minutes. Everyone understood the choice being offered. Lie to the Council and preserve the illusion of galactic superiority, or tell the truth and potentially start a war that the Council might not be able to win. "There is a third option," Commander Chen added thoughtfully. "You could suggest that the Council consider approaching humanity as equals rather than subjects. You could propose genuine cooperation between galactic civilization and the species that survived the worst death world in the known universe. And if the Council refuses, then they'll learn what every other species that tried to conquer us learned. The universe is a dangerous place, Ambassador, but it's not nearly as dangerous as making enemies of the people who learned to call danger home." 3 months after the encounter with the human fleet, Ambassador Kelthar stood before the Galactic Council High Assembly, his 4 eyes focused on the sea of alien faces that represented the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The chamber had never been so full, nor so tense. He had made his choice that day in human space. Now he would learn whether it was the right one. "Honored representatives," he began, his translator collar converting his nervous clicks into galactic common, "I must inform you that our assumptions about the outer spiral territories were incorrect. We are not alone as advanced civilizations, and the balance of galactic power has fundamentally changed. High Counselor Vethra, a crystalline being whose species had dominated galactic politics for millennia, leaned forward with obvious skepticism. Ambassador Kelthar, your initial reports suggested successful first contact with a primitive species. Are you now claiming this assessment was wrong? Kelthar's breathing sacs fluttered with anxiety. Not wrong, honored counselor. Deliberately misleading, at the request of the species in question. A wave of shocked clicks, whistles, and harmonic tones rippled through the assembly. No first contact species had ever been in a position to make requests of Galactic Council ambassadors. Dr. Vixen, still pale from their experience, activated her holographic displays. Members of the assembly, we were permitted to bring limited evidence of what we encountered. What you're about to see may challenge everything we believed about evolutionary development and technological advancement. The first images appeared above the assembly floor. Earth rotating slowly, its surface visible through swirling clouds. To most galactic species, it looked like a vision of hell, violent storms, crushing gravity, poisonous atmosphere. The planet designation is Earth, Dr. Vixen continued. Gravity 2.3 times galactic standard. Atmospheric pressure that would crush most of our people. Oxygen levels that would cause immediate toxicity in 80% of known species. Radiation levels from their star that would cause cellular breakdown in most galactic citizens within days. High Counselor Zarth of the Silicon Collective buzzed with disbelief. No complex life could evolve under such conditions. Your instruments must have malfunctioned. Taynor stepped forward, his antennae twitching with remembered terror. Honored Counselor, the instruments functioned perfectly. Complex life not only evolved there, it thrived, and eventually it developed space travel. The next series of images showed human cities, vehicles, and technology. To the assembled representatives, it looked impossible. Structures rising into the poisonous atmosphere, vehicles moving at speeds that would be lethal to most galactic species. Technology that seemed to ignore basic safety principles. These beings call themselves humans, Kelthar continued. They are the apex predators of their world, and their world created apex predators capable of surviving anything the universe could threaten them with. High Counselor Vethra's crystalline structure flickered with what might have been amusement. Ambassador, you seem to be suggesting that a single species from one death world poses some kind of threat to galactic civilization. Surely you understand how absurd that sounds. Kelthar exchanged glances with Dr. Vixen and Taynor. This was the moment that would determine the future of galactic politics. With trembling manipulator arms, he activated the final display. The human fleet appeared above the assembly floor, 200 ships in perfect formation around the tiny Galactic Council vessel. The size disparity was shocking enough, but the weapons readings made several representatives gasp audibly. Each ship, Dr. Vixen said quietly, carried enough destructive capability to sterilize a planet. Their technology operates on principles we don't understand. Their power generation exceeds anything in our databases, and their crews function normally under acceleration that would kill most of us instantly. The silence in the assembly chamber was profound. Representatives who had governed the galaxy for centuries found themselves confronting the possibility that their authority was not absolute. High Counselor Kintar of the Merchant Princes finally spoke. Even if this is accurate, they are confined to one system. Their range must be limited. We could simply avoid contact. Taynor's antennae drooped with exhaustion. Honored Counselor, they are not confined to one system. They informed us that this was merely their home guard. They have colonies throughout their region of space, and their technology allows faster-than-light travel using methods our scientists cannot explain. Dr. Vixen added more data to the display. They also demonstrated complete penetration of our computer systems. They accessed our databases, our communications, even our classified military specifications. They did this while we were talking to them, as if it required no effort at all. The implications slowly sank in across the assembly. If humans could penetrate Galactic Council computer systems so easily, what else might they have accessed? How much did they know about galactic civilization? How long had they been watching? You mentioned making a choice, Ambassador, High Counselor Vethra said slowly. What choice were you given? Kelthar straightened to his full height. We could report that they were primitive and posed no threat, allowing the Council to continue believing in its technological superiority. We could tell the truth and risk the Council making them enemies, or we could propose a third option, which is genuine cooperation between equals. Recognition that humanity represents something new in galactic civilization, a species that survived evolution's harshest testing grounds and emerged stronger than anything we've previously encountered. The assembly erupted in debate. Some representatives argued for immediate military action to contain the human threat. Others suggested isolation protocols to prevent contamination of galactic civilization. A few brave voices proposed that perhaps humanity could be integrated as council members through the standard procedures. High Counselor Vethra called for order. Ambassador, did these humans make any demands? Any threats? No direct threats, Honored Counselor, but they made their capabilities very clear. They also provided historical context that the Assembly should be aware of. Kelthar activated another display showing the locations of missing galactic expeditions over the past 50 years. The pattern was obvious once mapped. Every disappearance had occurred in the same region, where humanity had been developing its space capabilities. The Mercarian Trading Consortium, the Hegemony of Blessed Worlds, the Iron Brotherhood exploration fleets, all encountered humanity before we did. None returned to report their findings. The Assembly fell silent again as representatives realized the scope of what they were facing. Multiple galactic powers had attempted contact with humanity. All had been neutralized so efficiently that the galactic community never learned what had happened to them. They destroyed entire civilizations? High Counselor Zarth asked. They defended themselves against attempted conquest, Kelthar corrected. Each encounter followed a similar pattern. The galactic power attempted to impose their authority on humanity. Humanity educated them about the consequences of such attempts. Dr. Vixen pulled up the final data they had been permitted to bring. The humans provided us with detailed records of each encounter. They attempted peaceful contact first in every case. They offered fair terms for coexistence. Only when faced with invasion or forced conversion did they resort to military action. Taynor added, they also kept detailed records of galactic civilization, behavior patterns, and military capabilities. They've been studying us far longer than we've been aware of them. They know our strengths and weaknesses better than we know theirs. The debate that followed would become legendary in galactic political history. Some representatives argued for preemptive strikes against humanity before they could expand further. Others pointed out that such strikes had already been attempted by multiple galactic powers, with universally disastrous results. A few representatives suggested that perhaps the galaxy needed to reconsider its approach to first contact entirely. Maybe the assumption that all new species would naturally accept galactic authority was no longer valid. High Counselor Vethra finally called for a formal vote. The Assembly could choose to classify humanity as a galactic threat requiring military response, attempt traditional integration procedures, or pursue the unprecedented option of recognizing them as sovereign equals. The vote was closer than anyone expected. Military action was rejected by a narrow margin. Too many representatives had reviewed the evidence and concluded that war with humanity would be devastating for everyone involved. Traditional integration was also rejected when several council military advisors privately confirmed that they had no confidence in their ability to force human compliance. By the smallest possible margin, the Assembly voted to pursue diplomatic relations with humanity as a sovereign galactic power. For the first time in galactic history, the Council would approach a new species as equals rather than subjects. 6 months later, Ambassador Kelthar found himself aboard a human space station orbiting Mars, humanity's first terraformed world. The station was a marvel of engineering that operated on principles the galactic community was still trying to understand. But what impressed him most was not the technology, it was the attitude. Commander Chen, now promoted to Admiral Chen and serving as humanity's first galactic representative, greeted him with the same calm confidence she had displayed during their initial encounter. But now there was an undertone of cautious optimism. "Ambassador Kelthar," she said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Thank you for keeping your word. Your recommendations to the Council have opened possibilities that frankly surprised us." Kelthar carefully grasped her hand, still amazed that human skin could maintain integrity under conditions that would cause his own flesh to rupture. "Admiral Chen, I must admit that your species continues to surprise the galactic community. Your technological sharing agreements have revolutionized several fields of study." It was true. In just 6 months of limited cooperation, human innovations had advanced galactic medicine, engineering, and computer science by decades. Their approach to problem-solving, developed through millions of years of survival on a death world, had provided solutions to challenges that had stymied galactic scientists for centuries. "There's something I need to tell you, Ambassador," Admiral Chen said as they walked through the station's observation deck. Below them, Mars stretched red and beautiful, its atmosphere slowly thickening through human terraforming technology. "What is it?" "The Council thinks they're getting the best of this arrangement. They think they're gaining access to superior human technology in exchange for galactic citizenship and protection." She paused at a viewport, showing the vast scope of human industrial activity. "They don't understand that we're not looking for galactic protection." Kelthar felt his familiar anxiety returning. "What are you looking for?" "Partnership. Real partnership. Because the truth is, Ambassador, the galaxy needs us more than we need the galaxy. The universe is full of threats that galactic civilization isn't equipped to handle. Threats that require the kind of strength that can only come from surviving the worst possible circumstances." She gestured toward the deep space sensors, showing activity beyond the galactic rim. "Your long-range observatories have detected anomalous signals from outside the galaxy. Things that suggest intelligences vast and hostile. The kind of threats that would require every possible advantage to survive." Kelthar's 4 hearts began beating rapidly as he understood what she was suggesting. "You think something is coming?" "We know something is coming. Our deep space monitoring has confirmed it. The galaxy is going to face challenges that will require every species working together as genuine allies, not as rulers and subjects." Admiral Chen turned to face him directly. "The question is whether the Galactic Council is capable of adapting to that reality, whether they can learn to think like survivors instead of conquerors." Looking at her calm, confident expression, Kelthar realized that humanity's emergence into galactic civilization wasn't just a political development. It was preparation for something larger, something that would test whether the galaxy's inhabitants were strong enough to survive what was coming from the darkness between stars. For the first time since encountering humanity, Kelthar felt something other than fear. He felt hope. Because if the universe was about to become more dangerous, the galaxy now had allies who had learned to make danger their strength. Outside the viewport, human ships moved with deadly grace through the void, their crews preparing for challenges that galactic civilization couldn't yet imagine. And for once, Kelthar was grateful that they feared for their lives, because that fear had forged them into exactly what the galaxy needed them to become.